Hello, this is Junko. Before we begin, let me say a few words about the writer, Doppo Kunikida. Doppo Kunikida was a Japanese writer of the Meiji era. He was born in 1871 and he died in 1908. He is remembered as a writer who loved nature and as one of the early voices of modern Japanese literature. One of his best-known works is Musashino. It was published in 1898. In this beautiful work, Doppo wrote about the quiet charm of Musashino, the wide fields and woods that once spread to the west of Tokyo. Even today, you can still find places in Tokyo that remember this work. In front of the north side of JR Mitaka Station, there is a stone monument for Doppo Kunikida. It was built by the city in 1951. The monument has a relief of Doppo's face, and on the stone you can read the words, "Freedom lives in the forest." Those words were written by Mushanokoji Saneatsu. There is also another literary monument near Sakurabashi Bridge over the Tamagawa Josui. It carries a passage from Musashino. These places help us remember the world that Doppo loved, and they are not far away. Mitaka is only about 30 minutes from Tokyo Station by the JR Chuo line, so this literary place is close enough to visit easily, yet far enough to make you feel the quieter side of Tokyo. When we listen to Musashino, we are not only hearing a piece of literature, we are also stepping into a landscape, a memory, and a way of seeing nature through the eyes of Doppo Kunikida. Now, let us begin the reading of the main text. Part 1. I once saw, on a map made during the Bunsei era, a note that read, "The lingering trace of Musashino now remains only in Iruma district." On that same map, there was also a long annotation about the district. It said that Kote Sashihara and Kumegawa had once been ancient battlefields. According to the old chronicle, Taiheichi, on the 11th day of the 5th month in the 3rd year of Genko, a battle was fought at Kote Sashihara between the Genji and the Heiki. The fighting continued throughout the day, clashing more than 30 times. At sunset, the Heiki retreated 3 ri and took up their position at Kumegawa. At dawn, the Genji forces pressed forward and attacked the camp at Kumegawa. Reading this note, I imagined that the place where the last traces of Musashino still remained must surely be somewhere around that old battlefield. I have often thought of going there myself, yet somehow I have never done so, and so I cannot help wondering whether the land still remains today as it once was. In any case, the desire to see Musashino, even if only the faint shadow of the Musashino I have known through paintings and poems, surely cannot belong to me alone. Such is the fame of Musashino. But what has become of it now? A year ago, I began to feel a strong wish to answer that question for myself. I wanted to examine the matter carefully and satisfy my own curiosity. And since then, that wish has only grown stronger. Now I ask myself whether this desire can truly be fulfilled by my own efforts. I will not say that it cannot be done, but I do believe that it will not be easy. Perhaps that very difficulty is the reason why I find the Musashino of today so fascinating,
and I suspect there are not a few others who feel the same. For that reason, I shall begin here with a small attempt. I will write down what I have seen and felt from autumn to winter, and in doing so, I may fulfill at least a small portion of my wish. If I must first give an answer to the question I posed, it would be this. The beauty of Musashino today is no less than it was in the past. What the Musashino of former times looked like when seen with one's own eyes, that must have been beauty beyond imagination. Yet the Musashino I see today moves me so deeply that I am almost tempted to make such a bold declaration. Still, when I speak of beauty of Musashino, perhaps the word beauty is not quite the right one. Rather than beauty, I should say poetry, for that word seems to express it better.
Part 2. Lacking sufficient materials, I shall try using my own diary as a source. From the early autumn of the 29th year of Meiji until the beginning of the following spring, I lived in a small thatched cottage in the village of Shibuya. It was during that time that the desire I mentioned earlier first arose in me, and that is also the reason why I shall now write only of the months from autumn to winter. September 7th. Yesterday and today a strong south wind has been blowing. Clouds are driven across the sky, then swept away again. Rain falls, then stops. At times, sunlight breaks through the clouds, and the shadows of the woods suddenly flash with light. Such is the beginning of autumn in Musashino today. The woods still keep the green of summer, yet the sky has already changed completely. Rain clouds, carried by the southern wind, pass low over the sky of Musashino, bringing frequent showers. Then, in moments of clearing, the sunlight, still heavy with moisture, falls upon the distant woods and gleams upon the nearer groves. Often I have thought how beautiful Musashino must appear on such a day, if only one could behold the whole plain at once. 2 days later, in my entry of the 9th, I wrote, "The wind is strong. The voice of autumn fills the fields. Floating clouds change endlessly." Around that time, such weather continued day after day. The scene of sky and plain changed without pause. The sunlight still had the warmth of summer, while the color of the clouds and the sound of the wind already belonged to autumn. I found the whole spectacle deeply poetic. Taking this as the beginning of autumn in Musashino today, I shall place here several entries from my diary until the end of winter, so that one may see something of the changing scenes and their elements. September 19. Morning. The sky is overcast. The wind has fallen still. Cold mist and heavy dew. The voices of insects are abundant. It is as though heaven and earth themselves have not yet awakened. September 21. The autumn sky is as if freshly wiped clean. The leaves shine like flames. October 19. The shadows of the woods appear distinctly dark. October 25. In the morning, the mist is deep. In the afternoon, the sky clears. At night, the moon appears between broken clouds. Before dawn, while the mist has not yet lifted, I leave the house, walk across the fields, and visit the woods. October 26th. In the afternoon, I visit the woods. I sit deep within the forest, look in every direction, listen carefully, gaze quietly, and fall into silent thought. November 4. The sky is high and the air clear. At dusk, I stand alone in the wind-swept fields.
Mount Fuji appears far away in the heavens. Nearby, the mountain ranges that mark the borders of the provinces lie dark along the horizon. A single star shines. Twilight slowly arrives. The shadows of the woods gradually fade into distance. November 18. I walk in the moonlight. Pale mist crawls along the ground. Moonlight breaks among the trees. November 19. The sky is clear, the wind pure, the dew cold. Everywhere the eye meets yellow leaves mixed with green trees. Small birds sing in the treetops. Along the road there is not a single human figure. I walk alone, lost in thought, sometimes murmuring a line of verse, wandering wherever my feet carry me through the outskirts. November 22. Late at night, outside the sound of wind passing through the woods is eerie. Drops fall incessantly, yet it seems that the rain itself has already stopped. November 23. Last night's wind and rain have shaken down almost all the leaves. The rice fields, too, have nearly been harvested. The landscape has taken on the lonely appearance of winter. November 24. The leaves have not yet completely fallen. When I gaze at the distant mountains, my heart almost melts with longing. November 26th. Written at 10 o'clock at night. Outside, the wind and rain roar terribly. Drops answer one another. All day long, a deep mist has filled the air, as though the fields and woods had entered an eternal dream. In the afternoon, I walk with my dog. I enter the woods and sit silently. The dog falls asleep. A stream flows out from the forest and back into the forest again, carrying fallen leaves upon its surface. From time to time, a passing shower moves quietly through the woods, the sound of it crossing the fallen leaves, soft and gentle. November 27th. Last night's storm has completely cleared away this morning. The sun rises warmly. Standing upon the hill behind the house, I see Mount Fuji shining white above the distant mountains. The wind is pure, the air clear. Indeed, it is the morning of early winter. Water fills the rice fields, reflecting the shadows of the woods upside down. December 2nd. This morning, frost sparkles in the sunlight like snow. After a while, thin clouds appear, and the sunlight turns cold. December 22nd. Snow falls for the first time. Late at night. The wind has died. The forest is silent. Snow falls steadily. Holding up a lantern, I look outside. The falling snow glitters in the light. Ah, Musashino is silent. And yet, if I listen carefully, I can hear the sound of wind passing through the distant woods. Or is it truly the wind? January 14th. This morning, heavy snow. The grape trellis has collapsed. Late at night. The sound of wind moving through the treetops is heard far away. Ah, this must be the winter gale passing from forest to forest across Musashino. Drops of melting snow circle beneath the eaves. January 20th. A beautiful morning.
The sky holds not a single cloud. The ground sparkles with frost pillars like silver. Small birds sing among the branches. The treetops are sharp as needles. February 8th. The plum blossoms have opened. The moon has become quietly beautiful. March 13th. Midnight. The moon tilts westward. The wind rises suddenly. Clouds gather. The woods begin to murmur. March 21st. 11 at night. Listening to the wind outside. Now it sounds far away, now suddenly near. Has spring arrived, or has winter fled?
Part 3. In former times, Musashino was said to have been famous for the boundless beauty of its endless plains of pampas grass. Today, however, Musashino is a land of forests. Indeed, one might say that the forests themselves are the very characteristic of Musashino as it exists now. The trees are mainly oaks. In winter, they shed all their leaves, and in spring, fresh green buds burst forth, as though dripping with life. This transformation spreads at once across the plains east of the Chichibu Mountains, extending for many miles. Through the 4 seasons, in haze, in rain, in moonlight, in wind, in mist, in passing showers, in snow, in deep green shade, and in crimson autumn leaves, the land presents endlessly changing scenes. Such beauty is not easily understood by those who come from Western Japan or from the northern provinces. It seems that the Japanese people themselves have not fully appreciated the beauty of these deciduous oak forests until quite recently. When one spoke of forests in Japanese literature and art, it was almost always pine forests that were admired. One rarely finds in poetry the image of listening to a passing shower deep within an oak forest. I myself was born in Western Japan. 10 years have passed since I first came to Tokyo as a student in my youth. Only in recent years have I come to understand the beauty of such deciduous forests, and it was largely through the influence of the following passage that I learned to appreciate it.
Once, in the middle of September, I sat for a day within a birch forest. Since morning, a light rain had been falling. From time to time, the clouds would part, and warm sunlight would shine through. The sky was whimsical beyond measure. Pale white clouds spread across the heavens like drifting veils. Then suddenly, the clouds would break apart here and there, and through those openings the blue sky would appear, clear and bright, like the keen gaze of a human eye. I sat quietly, looking around me and listening. The leaves above my head trembled softly. From that faint sound alone, one could already sense the season. It was not the cheerful rustling of early spring, laughing as though delighted, nor was it the gentle whisper of summer, nor yet the endless chatter of late autumn, restless and uneasy. Rather, it was a quiet murmur, so faint that one could scarcely hear it at all. The wind moved softly along the treetops, as though trying not to be noticed. Within the rain-damp forest, the scene changed constantly as the sky alternated between brightness and cloud. At times, it seemed as though everything around me had suddenly begun to smile. A warm light spread everywhere. The slender trunks of the birch trees, though not very dense, took on an unexpected sheen like white silk.
The small fallen leaves scattered upon the ground caught the sunlight and shone with dazzling golden light. The tangled stems of ferns twisted everywhere before my eyes, their color like overripe grapes. This passage comes from the opening of a short story titled Ibiki, translated by Futabate from a work by Turgenev. It was largely through the delicate descriptive power of that passage that I came to understand the charm of deciduous forests. The scene described there is in Russia, and the forest is made of birch trees, while the forests of Musashino are oak. Botanically, they are very different, yet the atmosphere of a deciduous forest is the same. I have often thought that if the forests of Musashino were not composed of oaks, but of pines or some other tree, the landscape would become monotonous and far less worthy of admiration. Because they are oaks, the leaves turn yellow in autumn. Because they turn yellow, they fall. Passing showers whisper through them. The winter wind cries among them. When a sudden gust strikes a hill, countless leaves rise high into the sky, flying away like flocks of small birds. Once the leaves have completely fallen, the forests stretching for miles stand bare all at once. Above them hangs the pale blue winter sky. Then Musashino enters a profound stillness. The air grows clearer. Distant sounds become sharply audible. The flutter of birds' wings, their singing voices, the wind murmuring, ringing, whistling or crying through the trees, the insects chirping in the shadows of the grass, the rumble of carts along the forest paths, the sound of hooves scattering fallen leaves, the voices of villagers passing by, footsteps fading into the distance. Sometimes the sudden crack of a rifle echoes from a nearby wood. Once, when I entered a forest with my dog and sat reading on a tree stump, I heard something fall deep among the trees. The dog lifted its ears and stared into the darkness, but nothing more happened. Perhaps it was only a chestnut falling, for chestnut trees are plentiful in Musashino. And as for the sound of passing showers, nothing could be more quietly beautiful. The rain moves gently across the land, over fields, forests, groves, and distant woods, softly whispering as it passes. If you visit the woods around Nakano, Shibuya, Setagaya, or deeper toward Kogane in mid-autumn or early winter and sit quietly for a moment, you will hear these many sounds. They begin suddenly, they cease suddenly, they draw near, then fade away again. And when at last all sound disappears, you may feel the deep silence of nature itself, as though the breath of eternity had drawn close.
Part 4. In my diary of October 25th, I wrote, "I walked across the fields and went to visit the woods." And again, in my entry of November 4th, "At dusk, I stood alone in the wind-swept field." So once more I will quote Turgenev. I stopped. I picked up a bouquet of flowers. Then I left the woods and stepped out into the open field. The sun drifted low in the deep blue sky. The shadows it cast had grown pale and cold. A faint bluish light spread quietly in every direction. There was still perhaps half an hour before sunset, yet already the evening glow had begun to stain the far edge of the sky with red. Across the yellow, dried stubble of the harvested fields, the autumn wind blew fiercely. Driven by the wind, small fallen leaves sprang up in hurried flight, crossed the road that ran along the forest edge, and rushed past me. The forest, standing like a wall along the field, rustled everywhere in a restless murmur. It did not glitter brightly, but flickered faintly, as though scattering tiny fragments of light. Dry grasses, weeds, and straw, and the spiderwebs tangled among them, all swayed like waves in the wind. I stopped once more. For some reason, I felt a strange loneliness. The landscape before my eyes stretched wide and clear, yet there was nothing cheerful in it, nothing playful. Instead, one seemed to glimpse the stern approach of winter. A timid crow beat its heavy wings, cutting sharply through the wind as it flew high above my head. Suddenly, it turned its neck, glanced sideways at me, then rose higher still, crying out sharply as though its voice were torn apart by the wind before disappearing beyond the woods. A flock of pigeons came rushing from the direction of a granary, but suddenly they shot upward, as if rising like a column into the air, and then scattered all at once across the open field. Ah, autumn! Someone seemed to be passing beyond a distant hill. The hollow sound of an empty cart echoed through the air. This is a scene from the Russian countryside. Yet the fields of Musashino, from autumn into winter, present a landscape not very different from this. In Musashino, there are no bare hills, but the land rises and falls like the swell of a great sea. From a distance, it appears to be a single wide plain, yet here and there the higher ground dips down, forming small and shallow valleys. At the bottom of these valleys, there are usually rice paddies. The fields lie mainly upon the higher ground, and that higher land is divided between woods and farmland. The fields themselves are the open plains, yet the woods never extend for many miles. Indeed, there is probably none that continues even for a single mile. Nor do the fields stretch endlessly. Around one grove of trees, there may be fields. Around a cluster of fields, there may be woods. Between them, farmhouses stand scattered, dividing the land still further. Thus, woods and fields intertwine everywhere. One moment you enter a forest, the next moment you step out into an open field. This is one of the distinctive features of Musashino. Here there is nature, and here there is human life. It is unlike the vast wilderness of Hokkaido, with its untouched plains and great forests. Musashino possesses a character of its own. When the rice ripens, the paddies in the valleys turn yellow. When the rice has been harvested and the shadows of the woods fall upon the water of the fields, the radish fields reach their height. Soon the radishes are pulled from the soil and washed beside small pools or streams. Then the plains grow green again with the fresh shoots of wheat. At the edge of a wheat field, a patch of open ground may remain untouched, where silver grasses and wild chrysanthemums sway in the wind. One edge of the grasslands gradually rises higher until its far end seems to cut the sky itself. Climbing there on tiptoe, one can see beyond the breaks in the forest the mountains of Chichibu lying dark along the horizon. They appear almost as though they run along the horizon and then sink beneath it. Now then, should one descend again into the fields, or lie down in the grasslands beyond them, sheltering from the north wind behind piled dry grasses, while letting the gentle warmth of the southern sun fall upon one's face? Or perhaps simply follow the road that leads into the forest? Often I have hesitated in this way. Yet there is no cause for worry. For I have long known through experience that whichever road one chooses among the many paths crossing Musashino, it will never lead to disappointment.
Part 5. A friend of mine once wrote to me from his hometown. In that letter, there was a passage that has remained in my memory. He wrote something like this. Not long ago, one evening, I walked alone through a field of tall pampas grass. While walking there, I began to think. Across this plain run many narrow paths, crossing one another in every direction. For hundreds of years, perhaps even longer, people must have walked these paths. They walked while saying that the morning dew was clear and beautiful. They walked again in the evening, admiring the glowing clouds of sunset. How many people, moved by quiet feelings, must have wandered here? Those who hated each other may have avoided one another, choosing different paths. Those who loved one another may have walked the same road, hand in hand, returning home together. Such thoughts naturally arise when one walks across an open field. But the roads of Musashino are somewhat different. Even if you walk with the intention of meeting someone, you may fail to meet them, and even if you try to avoid someone, you may suddenly encounter them around a bend in the woods. The roads of Musashino twist and wander. They turn to the right, they turn to the left, they pass through woods, they cross fields. At times, a road runs straight ahead, almost like a railway line. Yet before long, it curves again and seems to return to the same direction from which it came. Some roads hide themselves among trees. Others sink quietly into valleys. Then they appear again in open fields, only to vanish once more among the woods. Unlike the paths across wide plains, it is not easy to see people walking far away. Yet, in spite of this, or perhaps because of it, the roads of Musashino possess a richness beyond that of open country paths. Anyone who walks in Musashino should never worry about becoming lost. Whichever path you follow, simply go where your feet lead you. There will always be something to see, something to hear, something to feel. The beauty of Musashino reveals itself only to those who wander without purpose. One must walk along the countless roads that cross this land in every direction: spring, summer, autumn, winter, morning, noon, evening, night, under the moon, in falling snow, in wind, in mist, in frost, in rain. Even in the quiet showers of late autumn, simply walk along the road without haste. Turn right when the thought comes to you, turn left when you feel like it. Then, wherever you go, you will find something that satisfies the heart. I have often felt, deep within myself, that this is the greatest charm of Musashino. Where else in Japan could such a place be found? Certainly not in the wide wilderness of Hokkaido, nor in the plains of Nasu. Where else are forests and open fields so naturally intertwined? Where else are human life and nature joined so closely together? It is precisely because of this harmony that Musashino possesses such unique and wandering roads. Suppose that you are walking along a small path. Suddenly, it divides into 3 directions. Do not be troubled by this. Simply plant your walking stick upright upon the ground. Then follow the direction in which it falls. Perhaps that path will guide you into a small forest. When you reach the middle of the woods, the path may divide again. At such a moment, try choosing the narrower path. It may lead you somewhere unexpected.
You might come upon an old cemetery hidden deep within the forest. 4 or 5 moss-covered graves may stand quietly together. Before them lies a small open space. Nearby, delicate yellow maiden flowers may be blooming. If, above your head, a small bird sings among the branches, you may consider yourself fortunate. Then turn back and try the other path. Soon the forest will end. Before you, a wide field will suddenly open. From your feet, the ground slopes gently downward. Tall grasses spread across the land. The silver plumes of pampas grass shine softly in the sunlight. Beyond the grassland lies farmland. Beyond the fields stands a small cluster of low trees. Farther away, you may see a distant grove of cedar trees. Along the horizon, pale clouds gather. Between those clouds, faint mountains appear, almost blending with the sky itself. It is an October day of mild autumn warmth. The sunlight is gentle. A pleasant breeze moves quietly through the grass. If you walk down into the grassland, the wide view you saw before will disappear. Soon you will find yourself in the bottom of a small valley. There you may unexpectedly discover a narrow pond hidden between the woods and the grass. The water is clear and still. Fragments of white clouds drifting across the sky are reflected upon its surface. Along the edge of the water grow a few dried reeds. Walking beside this pond, the path again divides into 2. To the right lies another forest. To the left, a rising slope. Most likely you will choose to climb the slope. Those who walk in Musashino often prefer higher ground. Perhaps they hope to gain a wider view of the land. Yet such hopes are rarely fulfilled. From Musashino, it is difficult to look down over a broad landscape. Such views must be abandoned from the beginning. If you should wish to ask the way, speak to a farmer working in the fields. If the farmer appears to be over 40 years old, call out loudly. He will turn in surprise and shout the answer back to you. If the person is a young girl, approach quietly and ask in a softer voice. If it is a young man, remove your hat and ask politely. He will likely answer in a generous manner. Do not be offended if he appears somewhat rough. Such manners are simply the habit of young men around Tokyo. Following the path they indicated, the road may soon divide again. Even if the path they told you to follow seems unusually small, continue along it. Before long, you may suddenly find yourself standing in the yard of a farmhouse. Do not be alarmed. Ask again for directions. They may simply say, "If you step out through the gate, you will reach the main road." When you leave the gate, you will indeed find a familiar road. At that moment, you will smile to yourself. You will realize that this was a shortcut after all. Only then will you understand how helpful their guidance truly was. Sometimes you may come upon a straight road. On both sides stand trees whose leaves have turned bright yellow. The road continues like this for several hundred meters. How pleasant it is to walk there alone in silence. The tops of the trees glow brightly in the evening sunlight. Now and then the soft sound of falling leaves can be heard. All around you is still. No one appears before you. No one follows behind. If all the leaves have already fallen, the road will be covered with them. Each step will produce a dry rustling sound. The forest becomes open and transparent. The thin branches stretch upward like needles toward the blue sky. Still, no one appears. Only the sound of your own footsteps echoes across the fallen leaves.
From time to time, a mountain dove may suddenly fly away, startling you with the sound of its wings. Returning by the same path would be foolish. Even if you lose your way, you are still within Musashino. You will not truly be lost. Choose roughly the direction of home and follow another road. If you do so, you may unexpectedly witness a beautiful sunset. The sun sinks toward the back of Mount Fuji, yet has not completely disappeared. Clouds gathered around the mountain glow with golden light. Their shapes change moment by moment. Snow upon distant ridges stretches northward like a chain of silver. Gradually, it fades into dark clouds. The sun sets. The wind begins to sweep across the fields. The woods begin to murmur. Evening descends upon Musashino. Cold air begins to touch your skin. At such a moment, you should hurry along the road. Then, looking back, you may suddenly notice the young moon shining beside the branches of a bare forest. The wind seems strong enough to blow the moon from the treetops. Suddenly, you step out into an open field once more. At that moment, you may remember an old haiku. Mountains grow dark. The fields fall into twilight. Pampas grass sways in the dusk.
Part 6. It was in the summer, 3 years ago. One day, a friend and I left my lodging in the city and went out toward the suburbs. We took the train from Misaki-cho Station as far as Sakai. After getting off there, we walked straight north for several blocks. Soon we came to a small bridge called Sakurabashi. Across that bridge stood a simple roadside tea house. The old woman who ran the place looked at us with surprise and asked, "What did you come here for at this time of year?" My friend and I looked at each other and laughed. "We came for a walk," I answered, "just wandering around for pleasure." The old woman laughed too, but it was a laugh that carried a hint of mockery. "Don't you know cherry blossoms bloom in spring?" she said. I tried to explain to her how enjoyable it was to walk through the countryside in the middle of summer. I spoke in a way that I thought might reach her understanding, but it was useless. With a single remark, she dismissed everything. People from Tokyo are carefree. That was all. Meanwhile, we wiped the sweat from our faces. The old woman kindly peeled some makua melon for us, and we ate it there. Beside the tea house, a tiny stream was flowing. It was only about a foot wide. We washed our faces in its cool water before leaving. The water in that little channel probably came from the Koganai waterway. It was clear and refreshing. It flowed gently through the green grass, looking most comfortable in its course. From time to time, it made a soft bubbling sound. Small birds came down to it. They dipped their wings in the water and seemed to wait their turn to wet their throats. But the old woman paid no attention to such things. She probably used that same water every morning and evening to wash her pots and pans. After leaving the tea house, we slowly began climbing the embankment of Koganei, heading upstream. Ah, how delightful that walk was! It is true that Koganei is famous for its cherry blossoms. Because of that, walking along the embankment in the middle of summer might appear foolish to those who look on from outside. But such words can only come from those who do not yet know the summer light of Musashino. The sky was filled with heavy, humid clouds rising upward, clouds piled upon clouds. Between them, deep blue sky appeared. Where the clouds touched the blue sky, their color was difficult to describe. It was neither silver nor snow. It was pure white, transparent and calm. Because of this contrast, the blue sky behind them appeared even deeper and richer.
If the sky had shown only this, it might not have seemed especially like summer, yet a hazy, somewhat muddy veil drifted between the clouds. This haze disturbed the shapes of the sky. Everything seemed to move. Forms overlapped and scattered. They shifted freely and irregularly. Beams of light tore through the clouds. Shadows cast by the clouds crossed one another again and again. A kind of wild and unrestrained spirit seemed to tremble faintly throughout the air. Every forest, every treetop, every blade of grass seemed to melt in the heat and light. Everything appeared drowsy, lazy, half asleep, as if intoxicated. In one place, the forest ended sharply in a straight line. Through that opening, we could see a wide field beyond. Across the entire plain, heat shimmered upward. It was difficult to gaze at it for long.
Wiping the sweat from our faces, we continued walking along the embankment. At times, we looked up into the great sky. At times, we peered into the depths of the forest. Sometimes, we gazed toward the distant horizon where the sky met the trees. Breathing heavily, we walked slowly forward. Was it exhausting? Not at all. Our bodies were filled with health and strength. Along the long embankment that stretched for miles, we saw almost no one. From time to time, a dog suddenly appeared from a farmhouse yard or from behind a thicket. It looked at us suspiciously. Then it gave a wide yawn and disappeared again. Beyond the woods, a rooster flapped its wings and crowed loudly. Its voice echoed among storehouse walls, cedar groves, forests, and thickets. It sounded cheerful and bright. Even upon the embankment itself, groups of chickens wandered here and there, playing in the shade of the cherry trees. Looking far upstream, we could see the waterway running straight ahead. In the distance, the water seemed to dissolve into a faint brightness, like silver dust scattered in the air. But as it approached us, the water glittered fiercely and rushed forward like an arrow. We stood upon a bridge and watched the flow both above and below. According to the play of light, the character of the stream changed constantly. Sometimes the upstream water suddenly grew dim. Then the shadow of a cloud rushed along the surface. In the blink of an eye, it reached us. For a moment, it paused. Then, suddenly, it slipped away to one side. After a while, the water shone brightly again. Then the forests on both banks and the cherry trees upon the embankment seemed to glow with fresh green light, like young grass after spring rain. Under the bridge, we heard a gentle sound of water. It was not the sound of water striking the banks, nor was it the sound of shallow rapids. The stream held a full and generous volume of water, and it flowed through a deep clay channel, almost like a smooth wall. Because of this, the water twisted and tangled with itself. Currents struggled together and mingled. From that motion, the sound was born. What a strangely familiar and comforting sound it was. At that moment, I was reminded of a line of poetry. Let us match this water's pleasant tune with some old border song or catch that suits a summer's noon. Hearing the water, I almost felt as though somewhere beneath the shade of the cherry trees, an old man of 72 might be sitting with a young boy beside him. I looked around as if expecting to see them there. The farmers whose houses were scattered along both sides of this stream appeared to me to be truly fortunate people. And of course, I also felt that we ourselves were fortunate. There we were, walking along the embankment in straw hats, carrying nothing but a single walking stick. Part 7. The friend who once walked with me along the embankment of Kogane has now been appointed a magistrate and has gone to serve in a provincial town. After reading the essay I published previously, he wrote to me and sent the following reflections. For the sake of convenience, I feel necessary to quote his words. Musashino, he writes, is not merely the plain, commonly referred to as the 8 provinces of the Kanto region, nor is it simply the historical field where it is said that Ota Dokkan once received Yamabuki blossoms instead of an umbrella. I myself possess a certain Musashino whose boundaries I have set in my own mind. These boundaries have not been drawn arbitrarily. Rather, they have arisen naturally, just as the borders of a country or the limits of a village are often defined by mountains, rivers, or ancient landmarks. The limits of my Musashino come from several considerations. Within the area that I imagine as Musashino lies the city of Tokyo. Yet Tokyo itself must, of course, be excluded, for within those 808 busy streets where government offices such as the Ministry of Agriculture and Commerce stand in imposing buildings and where modern court trials are held, it is impossible to imagine the ancient landscape of Musashino. Moreover, a German woman whom I recently came to know once described Tokyo as a new capital. Looking at the city today, even if it had once been the Edo of the Tokugawa shoguns, one might still feel that such a description is appropriate. For these reasons, Tokyo itself must be erased from Musashino. Yet the place where the city ends, the outskirts of town, must never be erased. In my opinion, if one wishes to portray the poetic spirit of Musashino, these borderlands of the city must be taken as an important subject. Consider, for example, the neighborhood around Dogonzaka in Shibuya, where you once lived, or Gionzaka in Meguro, or the area around Kishimojin in Waseda, where you and I so often walked together. Shinjuku, Shirokane. These places stand precisely at the edge where city and countryside meet. To understand the character of Musashino, it is not enough to look outward from its plains toward Mount Fuji, the Chichibu Mountains, or the heights of Konodai. One must also turn and look back toward the capital city of Tokyo, which lies enclosed within its center. For that reason, it becomes necessary to go several miles out into the plain and describe it from there. In your essay, you wrote that life and nature are closely connected in Musashino. You also described the small pleasures of encountering unexpected things along the way. That observation is entirely correct. I myself once experienced something similar. I took my younger brother on an excursion toward the Tama River. After walking a mile or two, we would come upon a small cluster of houses. Then we would leave the houses behind. Soon another small settlement would appear. We would meet people or animals. Then, once again, there would be nothing but grass and trees. Because of this constant change, traces of human life appear scattered throughout the landscape like small decorations. I remember remarking how charming this pattern of life was. To express this charm, it is necessary to describe the scattered stations and settlements that lie throughout Musashino. Even where there is no official station, the rows of houses themselves must be depicted. Surveyors sometimes call such rows of buildings continuous dwellings. These too belong to the landscape of Musashino. The Tama River must also be included within the boundaries of Musashino. Our ancestors once called it the 6 Tama Rivers, yet where else is there a river quite like the Tama of Musashi?
Where that river joins the flat rice fields and low forests, the scenery carries a meaning as deep as the place where the great capital itself meets its surrounding countryside. Now consider the plains to the east. They are very open, filled with rice paddies, and the horizon lies low. Because of this, they may appear at first glance to fall outside Musashino. Yet they are undoubtedly part of it. From the area of Kinshibori in Kamedo toward the banks of the Kinegawa, the landscape formed by rice fields, scattered trees, and thatched houses possesses the true atmosphere of Musashino. One can recognize this especially by observing Mount Fuji. It is only from this region that Fuji appears so tall, almost as it does when viewed from Abuzuri near Zushi. Mount Tsukuba provides another sign. When its shadow appears low and distant upon the horizon, we sense that Musashino is quietly breathing in one corner of the Kanto plain.
Yet to the north and south of Tokyo, the territory of Musashino becomes extremely narrow. One might almost say it disappears altogether. This is partly due to the natural shape of the land, but it is also because the railway lines pass through this region. Through those railway lines, the city of Tokyo cuts across Musashino and connects directly with other regions. At least, that is how I feel. If I were to draw the boundaries of Musashino, I would begin at Zoshigaya. From there, the line would pass along the western side of the Nakasendo Road at Itabashi and extend toward the vicinity of Kawagoe. It would include the Iruma district mentioned in your essay and curve around until it reaches Tachikawa Station on the Kobu railway line. Within this region lie stations such as Tokozurawa and Tanashi. How full of charm these places are, especially when the greenery of summer grows deep and rich. From Tachikawa, the boundary follows the Tama River downward, as far as Kami Maruko. Hashioji, however, must never be included within Musashino. From Maruko, the line returns toward Shimo Meguro. Within this region lie places such as Fuda, Noborito, and Futako. Each of them possesses its own quiet charm. This forms the western half of Musashino. The eastern half begins around Kamedo and extends toward Komatsugawa. From the banks of the Kinegawa, it includes Horikiri and continues until it reaches the vicinity of Senju. If someone should object, this eastern portion might perhaps be removed. Yet it also possesses its own distinctive character and can certainly be considered part of Musashino. Part 8. I have almost no disagreement with the opinions expressed above. In particular, I strongly agree with the suggestion that the outskirts of Tokyo should be taken as an important theme. In fact, this is something that had already occurred to me. If one says that the outskirts of the city should be included as part of Musashino, it may sound somewhat strange at first, yet there is nothing mysterious about it. To describe the sea, one must also describe the shore where the waves break. It is much the same thing. For the moment, however, I will postpone that subject. Continuing from my walk along the embankment at Kogane, I would first like to speak about the streams that flow through present-day Musashino. The first is the Tama River. The second is the Sumida River. Of course, I would very much like to write about these two rivers in full detail, but that too must wait for another time. Instead, let us first turn our attention to the smaller streams that run quietly across Musashino. The stream at Kogane is one of them. When it reaches the outskirts of Tokyo, this stream flows through villages such as Sendagaya, Yoyogi, and Tunohazu.
Eventually, it enters Shinjuku and becomes the Yotsuya waterway. There are also streams that flow out from places like Inokashira Pond and Zenpuku Pond and become the Kanda water supply. Some streams pass through the district of Meguro and flow into the sea at Shinagawa. Others run through Shibuya and reach Kanesugi. And besides these, there are countless narrow channels and small ditches whose names are scarcely known.
If we were to see such streams elsewhere, we might not find them especially remarkable. Yet here in Musashino, they run across the flat land and gentle uplands, passing beneath woods, crossing open fields, appearing for a moment and then disappearing again. They twist and wind through the landscape. Because of this, they possess a charm that attracts the heart throughout every season: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. I myself grew up in a region of many mountains. For that reason, I had long been accustomed to rivers whose water remained perfectly clear, even when they were quite large. When I first saw the streams of Musashino, however, I felt rather uncomfortable. Except for the Tama River, most of the streams appeared somewhat muddy, but little by little I became accustomed to them. Before long, it seemed to me that this slightly clouded water actually suited the scenery of the plains. Indeed, it seemed more fitting for Musashino than perfectly transparent water would have been. I remember one summer night, 4 or 5 years ago. I was walking through the suburbs together with that same friend. At about 8 o'clock in the evening, we passed one of the bridges across the upper course of the Kanda waterway. The moon shone brightly that night, and the wind was clear and cool. The fields and forests appeared as though wrapped in a veil of white silk. It was a night of rare beauty. On that bridge stood 4 or 5 villagers. Leaning against the railing, they talked, laughed, and sang together. Among them was an old man. He repeatedly interrupted the songs and conversations of the younger men in a playful manner. The moon shone clearly above them. Its light drew the whole scene into a faint oval glow, so that the sight resembled a passage from a pastoral poem. My friend and I joined them and leaned against the railing as well, gazing at the moon. The moon was reflected clearly upon the slow-moving surface of the water. Whenever small insects touched the water, tiny ripples spread outward. For a moment, the face of the moon seemed to wrinkle. The stream curved out from the woods and then, drawing a half circle, disappeared once again among the trees. Fragments of moonlight broke through the treetops and fell upon the dark water, glittering softly. A faint vapor drifted just a few feet above the stream. During the season when radishes are harvested, if one walks through the countryside, one may see farmers everywhere along these small streams washing the soil from their radishes. Such scenes appear again and again beside the quiet waters of Musashino. Part 9. It is not necessary to speak only of Dogenzaka, nor specifically of Shirokane. What I mean is something broader than any one place. At the outer edge of Tokyo, the streets of the city gradually transform themselves. A road becomes the Koshu Highway. Another becomes the Ome Road. Another stretches out as the Nakahara Road. Another continues as the Setagaya Road. From the crowded streets, they push outward, entering the woods and the rice fields of the countryside. In such places, the scenery cannot easily be named. It is neither quite a city street nor quite a country post town. A certain form of human life and a certain form of nature mingle there together. From that mixture, a unique landscape emerges. To describe such places,
awakens my poetic imagination more strongly than almost anything else. Why do these scenes at the edge of the city draw our feelings so powerfully? I think I can answer that question in a single sentence. Such scenes somehow give us the impression that we are looking at a miniature picture of society itself. If I may say it differently, along those small houses and shopfronts, there seem to be hidden stories, stories that would stir the interest of both city people and country people alike. Small stories, yet stories filled with deep pathos, or perhaps stories so comical that one might burst into laughter. And if we look still more closely, we may see something else. The fading traces of life in the great city and the lingering echoes of life in the countryside meet here together. There they seem to slowly gather and swirl, forming a quiet eddy of human existence.
Look there. A one-eyed dog lies crouching beside the road. The territory in which that dog is known by name marks the true boundary of this little outskirts district. Look again. There is a small eating house. Upon the paper sliding door, the shadow of a woman appears. She is shouting in a voice that sounds half like laughter and half like tears. Outside, evening darkness gathers steadily. In the air floats a scent difficult to name, perhaps smoke, perhaps the smell of earth. 2 or 3 large carts pass along the road one after another. Their empty wheels rattle loudly along the tracks. The sound rises suddenly, then fades away. Soon it rises again. Look over there. In front of the blacksmith's shop, 2 pack horses stand quietly. Beside their dark silhouettes, several men whisper together. A horseshoe, glowing red with heat, is placed upon the anvil. Sparks burst outward. They scatter through the evening darkness and fly almost to the middle of the road. The men who were whispering suddenly burst into loud laughter. Meanwhile, the moon slowly rises behind the row of houses. At last, it reaches the top of a tall oak tree. Then the roofs of the houses on the opposite side begin to glow with pale light. From a lantern, thick black smoke of oil drifts upward into the night air. Around it, a dozen villagers and townspeople run about, calling loudly to one another. Piles of vegetables lie stacked here and there. This is a small vegetable market, a small auction ground where the produce of the countryside changes hands. Some houses fall asleep as soon as the sun sets. Others keep the light burning behind their paper doors until 2 o'clock in the morning. Behind the barber shop stands the house of a farmer. The lowing of cattle can be heard clearly out on the road. Next to the sake shop lives an old man who sells fermented soybeans. Early each morning he sets out toward the city, calling in a hoarse voice, "Natto, natto." Before long, the short summer night comes to an end. The faint light of dawn begins to appear. Soon carts begin to roll along the road again. They rumble without pause, rolling and rattling endlessly. By 9 or 10 o'clock, cicadas begin to cry from the tall treetops that rise above the road. The heat grows stronger. Dust is stirred into the air by the hooves of horses and the wheels of passing carts. Swarms of flies drift across the road, flying from house to house, from horse to horse. And yet, even amid such noise and movement, one can faintly hear the distant sound of the noon bell. Far away, beyond the sky of the city, the whistle of a train echoes softly. The sound seems to come from somewhere beyond the horizon. This concludes the reading of Musashino by Doppo Kunikida. Thank you very much for listening until the end. The narration was by Junko Yano. Until we meet again in another quiet moment.